Our medalla. We're going to the next part to go and get our money. Our medalla.
I call on all the ancestors, I call on all the Abasul, I call on all the Orisha. I ask you to come as we pour this libation offering to you to open this ceremony that we have every year. We ask you to come, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of you for many, many years. We call on Queen Coziah. We call on Queen Coziah.
Listen to me. The government must make a change. How they're going to take our Mexican token and they ain't going to tell us nothing about it. They must change it to Danish silver or gold. And we don't want no 8%. And we don't want no 10%. And we are not taking not even 50%. You know what we want, Matty? We want dollar for dollar.
Yes.
Idea. Then we go down by the police station by the police master jumping. That's right. Let's go. Let's go.
Which was one of the stops that the coal workers came to when they wanted to protest to the police commissioner. And it's fitting that we're here because Fort Christian has served for many years. Did serve for many years as the seat of the police department. In fact, when my grandfather, Henry Simmons, was a police sergeant, this is where he worked. And there was a place they called the dark hole where they put people who were troublesome. And whenever this place reopens, you'll get to see the dark hole again. But this was the place where Coziah and the other workers came to confront the police commissioner to get justice for their concern about wanting $1 for $1.
I am here on behalf of myself, my family, and all the other co-workers because we want dollar for dollar, fair pay.
But the fort served in a number of capacities. If you look behind you, you'll see the Frederick Lutheran Church. And there was a time when the fort served as the church because the church burned several times. And so there are ministers of the church because the Lutheran Church was the Church of Denmark. Some of them are buried under the floor of this fort. So the fort served many purposes in addition to being a fortress to protect the harbor. And so it is here that they came to seek justice. And in fact, hundreds of years later, there are at least 2 of us in this crowd, probably more. Marianne, you might have been here with us when the teachers were on strike.
Oh, yes.
And we came to this very fort. So this fort is significant in terms of people protesting and saying we want our fair share. Yes. Before we leave this site, I want to share with you one of the poems that was written about the coal workers, because these were men and women who got a penny for a basket of coal.
1 cent.
1 cent. And if you consider what that 1 cent was worth, it was really nothing. And so to be gypped of even that was really unfair. But Cyril Cricky, who was a musician and a writer, well known in the community, wrote a poem called Coal Carriers, and it gives you a sense of how people saw these workers. Their watch is the skyline which touches the sea, the soft plunging rollers that billow the sand. They hear the steam blast of the blue bosomed leaves and the thrilling salt echoes that ramble the land. The anthracite lumps they fling fast in the hold, and jingling pennies their slim purses feed. The hard hours write in a volume of gold, this solemn exchange of the commonest need. Black bathed in an ocean of dignified dust. They greet the worn smile of a glorified day. Co-sharers in toil and co-partners in trust. They sink with the sun at the close of his sway. And I want to repeat the one line, black bathed in an ocean of dignified dust, because to work gives you dignity. And so although they were covered in soot from head to toe, they did it with dignity because they were working earnestly for what they deserve. And so we leave the fort as just one of the places where the co-workers came to seek justice.
Sorry, we must all abide. The laws have been set.
Listen, let me go down there and strike up the orders to strike, okay? Alright, because I ain't taking this nonsense. I need new shoes. I can't get a Danish ham. Let's go.
The town was full of commotion because everybody was trying to switch out their Mexican tokens. The co-workers weren't worried as much about the tokens they had in their hand. They were worried about what they were continuing to be paid, and that was the issue. As they left the fort, they came forward, and the masses grew. It was an enormous crowd. They were loud. They were loud. Some on the outside thought they were menacing because they had stuff in their hand, they had sticks.
These worthless Mexican tokens they give us here ain't what a thing. They say they're going to throw it in the ocean down there over this or so. But I say keep them. Keep them?
These what? Let's talk. Listen, where the police people let me? We need to go. We go bust down the head.
Let me ask you a question. You work for nothing? Let me ask you a question. Are you work for nothing?
No. Let me tell you something. You see the stupid tokens they give us? My son, the thing them can't even buy us a piece of sausage. I need sausage for my children, them they can't buy sausage. I need bread. The children them need bread, they can't eat. And you wanna know what? My son, I can't even buy a butter for my shop. The butter gone.
I understand, but we have to handle this in a civilized matter. You understand?
Come.
In a civilized matter.
Let me tell all the plan. Listen here, right? Listen here. Right? This is the plan, okay? We gonna march up and down in these streets. We gonna go on a strike. We gonna march up along these streets, let the government know, let the businesses know that in St. Thomas we don't play.
They were the police officers were in the fort. But as you look back at King's Wharf, and all of this was water, and the ships came in this area, and they looked back towards where the legislature building is now. The military were putting together a detachment, and they sent one out as soon as they heard them come down that hill. They sent them out to make sure that this commotion would not grow anymore. But it did. They came here to the Hamburg American line, and this was not their main office, but this was an important office because this was King's Wharf, and everything came in here. And then they moved forward.
That's right. Dara for Dara. Let me go down to the post office down there. Dara for Dara. Dara for Dara. Dara for Dara.
we're facing the seat of government. Government Hill is across there, and that is where the government secretary's office was. And as was enacted just a few minutes ago, they wanted to make sure that the government knew what their complaints were. So they came here. We stop at this site so that we can look at the seat of government. And interestingly enough, J. Antonio Jarvis is one of the statues, the one in the middle, and he was the one who called them a mad and angry crowd. Now, when you go on strike, you want the people you're striking against to understand why, and you also want the government to understand. So this was an appropriate place for them to air their concerns.
What we want,
Dollar for dollar.
what we need,
Dollar for dollar.
we want,
Dollar for dollar.
we want.
Dollar for dollar.
What we want,
Dollar for dollar.
what we need,
Dollar for dollar.
we want.
Dollar for dollar.
We want.
Dollar for dollar. We need the money.
Mr. Governor, you see us here, we ain't come for no trouble, Mr. Governor. We ain't come for no trouble at all. We ain't come for no trouble. We just want a little fairness, just a little bit.
We work hard for our money. We sweat, we bleed, and now you can come and tell us this? We want our money, we want our fair pay, our fair share, dollar for dollar.
The workers organized. And they didn't have Facebook, Twitter, the internet, cell phones, or any of those things. But our ancestors communicated through song. And if you look at the words of the third song, Lil Gyal, it says, Lil Gyal, your mother call you. Lil Gyal, your mother call you. Lil Gyal, your mother call you. Don't come through the front door, pass through the back door. That was the signal to come out the back, so there was nowhere to meet. If you came out the front, somebody would see you. And there were, signs, signals, little clues and codes in the songs. And so that was one of the ways they communicated. And I want to share a little bit more about the poor women, because as was said, the majority of them were women. The men sometimes were supervisors and the dock and so on. Reading from one of the books that was written about Valjean's history, The Coal Women of St. Thomas, this writer says, the coaling of a steamer is a sight worth seeing. No sooner is it in port than a horn is blown. This is a signal for the coal carriers to assemble, and it is not long before 100 or more of them come trooping into the coal yard. By and by, they may be seen running to and fro the shore and the steamer with the heavy baskets of coal on their head. Now, I want you to know how heavy the stevedores' wages are $1 per day. The stevedores are the people working, the men working on the ship itself. The coal carrier is paid according to the amount of work done. Until January 1917, the rate for coal carriers was a cent for every basket brought on board. By dint of hard work, some of the stronger laborers were able to make as much as $2 a day. But this was possible, of course, for only a few days each week. To earn $2, it was necessary to fill 200 baskets, each of which contained from 85 to 95 pounds of coal, and to toil with these from the coal heap up a steeply inclined gangway to the bunkers of the ship. And I want you to think about what that meant. 200 baskets of coal per day to get $2. So this is why they had to protest when their $2 was being cut in half, okay? And from here we go down Main Street to where the merchants were after...
Listen here, Mr. Governor. You declare these tokens worthless. But you didn't think about the repercussions.
To Main Street we go.
What we want,
Dollar for dollar.
what we need,
Dollar for dollar.
we want.
Dollar for dollar. Dollar for dollar.
We want.
Dollar for dollar. Dollar for dollar.
governor declared that we would not be able to use these Mexican tokens, the business community gathered. They met to decide what they would do. It separated into 3 factions. One led by Auguste Burnett. He said, don't bring them, we don't want them, we're not taking them. He would not accept them at any cost. So there was no exchange. There would be no exchange. His group was made up of Mr. Conero, Mr. Levine, Mr. Carty, Mr. Lugo, Mr. Beretta, Mr. Creaky, Albert Henrik Rees, who was a pharmacist, so the apothecary, that is now the apothecary, is where he was. The Colonial Council and the Colonial Bank, which is a block away from here, and then the St. Thomas Savings Bank down below by the Market Square. The other side was led by my great-great-great-grandfather, or great-uncle, sorry, my great-uncle. His name was Samuel Henriquez Marone. And for the 12 days, they went back and forth. They had a public argument because they were members of the Colonial Council. They had a public argument in the newspaper, letters to the editor, back and forth every single day until the day of the strike. They started to move more business people to their side. There were those in the middle, and I want us to recognize their names as well. There was the Delanois, Souffrant, Van Beaverhut, Daniel, and Fonseca. They would exchange, but exchange only at a lower amount. That day, 120 years ago, all businesses closed their doors as the co-workers went through. Let us go through.
Well, you see the fine advertisement around the place? You gotta look at it. Fine advertisement, my son. And you know, Thomas Pearson and company, and the well-made Vienna shoes and slippers and boots, all made with style and durability. And do the work. But you want to know what to do? They close the doors to us. They don't want to take our money. But they want to give us the stupid token then. I can't believe this, man. I can't believe it. It is stupid. We should go straight down to Levine. Yes. And break our shop. That's what we do. No, man, remember civilized. Behave yourself. Let's go down to Levine. Let's go.
Passage, and as you notice, we came down an alley. We passed several alleys, and nowadays, you know, people go into the alleys to shop and there's air conditioning and so forth. But these alleys had a specific purpose back in 1892 and before that. Because remember, many of the buildings along here were warehouses. And so the cargo that came for sale, the merchandise, was brought into these warehouses. And there were trolleys that took the goods along a track. And if you go into it, there's an alley up there, A.H. Reese's alley all the way up. You can still see a piece of the track that carried the merchandise along on a rail. And that's so it was unloaded from the ship and taken into the alley. So I just want you to know a little bit about the alleys and how significant they were in terms of the commerce at that time. And of course they were not air conditioned, you know, so people were sweating and working really hard at the time they were working through these alleys.
We also want to know that for those people that are standing from here that way, you're in the water because the water came all the way up. At the edge, there were little wharfs where the boats would come in and they would park up, and different wharfs had different names. So we would pass H. Reese's Wharf, Atola Wharf, and so King's Wharf. And so know that it was a different place. So we would want to walk on the sidewalk and make sure that we are cognizant of what our ancestors did and where they were at the time. We are here in a place. Looking back in this area, Mr. Levine and his family lived. The day of the strike, there was an ad from Mr. Levine in the paper. It said, well, he didn't say it this way. He didn't say I had reconsidered. But really he had changed his mind. And he would exchange for something in Mexican pesos or Mexican tokens. In this place, his family lived right here on the front building. There were the kitchen quarters, and back here, these were the ovens for washing the whites, right? Because traditionally we wore white. It was easier to boil and then boil and then boil and then rinse, right? And so these were the ovens placed for that reason. There was a warehouse, and traditionally, when you look back at the old maps, this street was Meat Market Street. Because they sold, there were several stalls that sold meat. At the end, the warehouse went all the way to the water. When asking the current owners, which are descendants of Mr. Levine, what exactly did he sell? We were told that he sold general merchandise and general goods. So any dry stuff you would find pieces to make hadanga. You have to look that one up when you get home. Hadanga.
Similar to cut work.
Right? Beautiful stitch work.
Yeah, similar to cut work.
Similar to cut work, right? And they sold cloth on the boat and so forth. This is the place.
They acting as if we's foreigners. Like we don't want to buy from them. We want our dollar for dollar.
And you see, the thing is, what get me really hot about them, they got up in their fancy face with their fancy fandangle and thing, talking, and they said let us know, and then they're going to shut their doors to us, so we're going to spend our money in the bush. Slavery over!
What we need, dollar for dollar.
What we want, dollar for dollar. What we need, dollar for dollar.
Well, just to piggyback on what Nadine said, many of the stores, the buildings along Main Street, were residences at one time. And I know some people go on the galleries of them still to look at the carnival parade and so on. But as was said, it was the residence of the owners. Now, we're also...
I think we should go over the Market Square. So I think they can hear us a bit louder. Let's go. No, put on the rock set. Let's go.
Advertisement again. They say 2 cents and Square have the best bed and the best rate. And you know they get it 80 Ks, lion brand, Pelson a bear, my son.
Well, let me tell you something. I could care less who mother put it up. They taking our money, I ain't buying it. I wish I was going to tear it down. It's sickening. Let's go.
We look out and we see Castle Island. It was for the co-workers something that they saw in the early dawn. As they came out, the ships arrived, and they would hear the conch shell blow, and they would make. It was a hard, hard life. In case you didn't get it, it was a real hard life.
But this is, when we think about the coaling, we don't realize that all the coaling of the ships took place over on Hassel Island. I believe there were 4 stations over there. And then there was, the only one on St. Thomas was really at West Indian Company Dock. And you have to picture hundreds of people running up the plank of a ship. Because the ships came in and they didn't have fuel as they have today. They had coal as fuel. And I'm not sure really where the coal came from, but it was imported here. And so the coal workers would have to go and get the coal from one spot, take it in the baskets on their heads, up to the ship, dump it in the hole of the ship, and that's what fueled the ship so that it could go on its journey. And so there were hundreds of people who were doing this kind of work. And if you can imagine, these, mostly women as we said, would get up very early in the morning. Sometimes they would knock on each other's doors to call them. And they didn't make a lot of noise. They did it very quietly, and they all gathered and then they went and took care of what they had to do. Came here that were coaled by the coal workers. You had the East Asiatic Company, which was on the Danish Coal Walk. That's someplace out here. The French Coal Walk. Then you had the Hamburg American Walk, Royal Mails Packet Coal Walk, Bronsted and Company, and of course Signal Hill, which is over on Hassel Island. Now, some of you might know that Signal Hill was also used to notify people when a hurricane was coming. There were flags that they would put up on that had certain meanings, whether it was a circle in it or it was whatever color flag. The flags indicated whether it was a gale, a storm, a hurricane, how close it was. So Signal Hill was a significant place for people to look at.
They had come home, you see, because Savannah is where most of them lived. So now people who had stayed at home, some of the coal workers who were resting came out. And all those that supported them were here. They were strong. We're hearing strong? Strong! Okay. We're here at the Hamburg American line. This building was their main headquarters. But know that the headquarters was not only the headquarters here for them, as it was so close to Hassel Island, but it was also headquarters across the street for the Compagnie Générale Transatlantique, which would have been the French company that did the same type of coaling work. In fact, in this area, you had down the street the insurance company that insured the products that came in and those that were trading. You also had the Bronsted Company, coaling company, that was headquartered right next door to this particular building. This is where they were the loudest, because these were the companies that were paying them these worthless tokens.
Lived in one room with common kitchen and bathroom facilities located in the yard at the rear of the building. Princess Garden number 38 probably housed as many as 10 families. The frame shingle house built to the street line on the west of the lot is covered by a hip roof. It was recently reshingled, covered to a series of small stores, converted to a series of small stores. This tasteful type of restoration should encourage owners of other old structures to do the same. So people lived in those buildings, even though now they have little stores in them, and they gathered in the yard as a common meeting area. I can at this point just share very briefly my contact with calling. My mother, who was there with us in the gathering, Mommy, put up your hand. Her aunt was married to a man named David Hine, who was also working on the dock. Some of you might know David Hine is associated with the Indians at Carnival. But he also worked on the docks. And my mother told me that when she was young living with them, she would have to take his food to him on the wharf. And so when she got there, she would notice that he was not as covered in coal dust as the women were, which suggests that he was probably a supervisor. But it's the women who were covered in the dust who were doing most of the work. And one of the other pieces that I should share with you at this point, years ago, Isidore Paiwanski used to do an article in the newspaper. Yes. And he, one of his articles was dedicated to the coal workers and the fact that many of them contracted black lung disease from inhaling the coal. You know, people generally associated with folks working in the mines and so forth. And at that time, you know, nobody was really paying attention, but many of the women, you know, many of the people developed that disease because of the work that they did. And as has been said, Savannah is up here. This was the home of the poor people, the working people, and this was the home of many of the coal workers.
I really came to do this, and I agreed to do this because my great-great-grandfather, so I had a great-uncle on the one side, the merchant side, but I had a great-great-great-grandfather who was a coal worker, and he lived in this building right behind of us. Wow. He and his family, and I think I have a picture of a coal worker standing in front of this house that I always carry with me, because it reminds me that these people were people who were related to many of us. That's right. And so I want to call some names of some coal workers that lived in this area and in Congensgada area. James Lucas,
Ashe.
Anne Fleming,
Ashe.
John Williams,
Ashe.
Emily Denery,
Ashe.
Adam Gibbs,
Ashe.
Catherine Foy,
Ashe.
John James Benjamin,
Ashe.
Alexander Rail,
Ashe.
Johannes Williams,
Ashe.
Esther Richard,
Ashe.
Madeleine William,
Ashe.
Francis DeLone,
Ashe.
Annalise Peterson,
Ashe.
Anne Milliner,
Ashe.
Adelaide Roberts,
Ashe.
James Roberts,
Ashe.
Marianne Joshua,
Ashe.
Josephine Ingram,
Ashe.
someone named Nancy,
Ashe.
my great-great-grandfather Charles Smith,
Ashe.
and his father Samuel Smith.
Ashe.
Wow.
Get out of the house! Get out! We got to strike! Get out the house! We're going down by the market!
Standing in front of the bank, it was the St. Thomas Savings Bank. And at one point they stopped taking the Mexican silver. Now that bank, there was a VI community bank or something back in the 50s that still operated out of there. But anytime you have anything having to do with money, there has to be a bank. And if you look on the other side, well, the name is still over the doors, the St. Thomas Bank. And this was where the coal workers had some difficulty even getting their tokens acknowledged in the bank. And as we look across from the bank, we have the market square. And to your back, if you would look at that gray structure, that's the rostrum. I don't know how many of you have heard of Rothschild Francis, but Rothschild Francis was an activist here in the Virgin Islands, and he was mistreated and persecuted. But the rostrum is where he and many of the politicians in their day did a lot of their speaking. Area here that's significant in terms of not just gathering, selling food, but in getting information out to people. Is a place where public forums, if you would, were held. So you have the public gathering, you have the bank, all in the same area. And as we wrap up this tour today, looking at all the places that the coal workers gathered, marched to, protested at, I want to share with you a poem that was written by J. Antonio Jarvis called Coal Carriers. A whispered call from door to door, a careless laugh, a cry, a double rap and a smothered snore, coal carriers passing by. The mad moon smiling overhead, the long road silver gray, but somber shadows hold no dread for workers on their way. That dim, dark hulk along the dock, still seen in silhouette, must call at once despite the clock, a scheduled time is set. Black, willing toilers tramp along, from coal to ship to shore. Dim mirage dawn is hailed with song, the ship can hold no more. The blushing morn now shames the moon, and the workers homeward hie. Those dollars earned a welcome boon, coal carriers passing by. And so they passed by, yes, they walked from ship to shore when they were working, but on the day of the strike, they didn't walk calmly, they didn't walk quietly, they marched, they shouted, they chanted, and they came to this area when they learned that they in fact had been vindicated, and they learned then that they would get dollar for dollar.
I do this every year because this is important to me. Most of the people for the Virgin Islands who were leaders, who made things happen, were women. A lot of them were very young women, but they were women who led, who saw changes should be made, and they did something about it. So I don't want you all to forget that today. Remember what I'm saying.